Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're here to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins, their 2022-23 season just gone, and then the outlook on the season ahead. So I'll get kick-started with their season that's just been. What an up and down season that was for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, they had moments of absolute brilliance where I think people were thinking, yep, cool, they made the right decision. They've decided to sort of kick on with the signings of Letang and Malkin, and they're gonna push for it for at least another couple of years whilst Crosby's still in contract. And then it was quickly just bang straight back down, and then all of a sudden they'd pick it back up, and people were going, "Oh, here we go. They're off to a flight, another really good streak," and then it would just go and right back down again. So it's probably the craziest roller coaster you've seen in a while in terms of their season, but ultimately they faded out too much and left themselves too much to do in the back end. They were holding on to that playoff spot right up until the end, and Florida just pinned them. So they finished the season 19th overall, 40 wins and 91 points. It was not the season they were hoping. They missed the playoffs for the first time in 16 seasons. Like, it might not be the exact number, but it's been quite a journey for them. They've been extremely successful. 3 Stanley Cups in that stretch as well. So um, you know things can't last forever, but they weren't too far off. I think if they had a couple of injury concerns which hurt them as well, but ultimately it was just they had no consistency. They were too up and down. They couldn't hold a winning streak for two without going on an equally as bad losing streak, basically. So bit disappointing. However, with the strength of the East and where it's at, and the teams coming through the Metro, it was pretty easy to see that coming. We most people had a thought that the likes of Washington and Pittsburgh would start to be on the decline. It's just unfortunately for Pittsburgh, they did make the call to sort of continue to push with the signings of Letang and Malkin, but it didn't quite pan out for them. But yeah, other than that, they didn't finish too far off. Just ultimately, just a little bit too shy. If they had, maybe just instead of going on one of those losing streaks, if they had just ended it a game earlier, they might have actually made the playoffs. But I don't think they would have done anything if they made the playoffs anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But we'll move on now to I'll hand you over to Jaden to take you through the projected lineups for the 23-24 season as per cap friendly.
Alrighty, guys. So we got negative 2.3 mil in the salary cap, so we're currently over the salary cap. So we'll have to make some moves to get under. So Pittsburgh are definitely not done. You got Jake Gensel, Crosby, and Rust on the first line. That could change. You could put Raquel on the first line there as well. Geez, even Smith, if depending on who plays. But you got Smith, Malkin, and Raquel on Rocket Raquel, if you want to call him that, on the second line. Nieto, who they just brought in via free agency. Carter and Granlund on the third. They're trying to basically strip that third line with Carter and Granlund, try and move them out.
Mhm.
You got O'Connor, who's yet to resign. Lars Eller and Nola Chari, who Chari comes from Toronto with Dubas, I guess you could say. Basically, whole new fourth line. Essentially, they've replaced their whole entire penalty kill line with Nieto, Eller, and Achari. Defenders got Graves, who's been brought in this season, long-term contract, 4.5 mil. Bit long of a deal for Graves, but honestly, with this salary cap finally moving up, it'll probably work out really well over long term. So great addition there. Chris Letang, obviously partnered up there. Marcus Pedersen on the second with Jeff Petrie. Jeff Petrie, one of those trade baits at the moment. You got Joseph and Ruta on the third there. Jari and Smith, they've obviously decided to go with Jari for long term, signed 5 years. So we'll see if that's the right deal or right call or not. He's always been over 900, so he's at least decent. Will he win you a cup though? That's the question. Scratches, Hinostroza, Redwell. I don't know. We should call him Chad. Good Chad, mate. And, and then Nedeljkovic. Oh my god, my voice. And Nedeljkovic. Oh my god, I can always say that name, but I can't right now. Anyway, moving on. Notable losses: lose Archibald,
Always the
Benino.
way.
Yeah, it's always the way. You lose Archibald, Benino, Kagiguela. Oh my god, I cannot speak tonight.
You were having a shocker,
Yeah,
Kagula.
yeah, Kagua. Jumelin. Yeah, I know it's just my tongue, I think.
Yeah.
Kulikov, Poling, Tarasky, and then Zuka. So they lose quite a lot. Basically, your whole entire penalty kill is lost there through free agency. Obviously, bringing in a whole new penalty kill in the free agency. And not too much else to really speak there. Just a couple of entry-level contracts in this year's and last year's draft. Pretty late first-round pick in Pickering. And this year, only no second-round picks to speak of. Third round does get an EOC. It is good to see like a number 14, Yaga. So hopefully he can turn out to be something decent in the future. And not much dead cap in regards to Jack Johnson, just under $1 million. But they are over the cap. They need to make moves. They are linked with Erik Karlsson for whatever reason, because they've already got Chris Letang. I guess, if Chris Letang, God forbid, if he ever did have any other health issue, at least that's a decent replacement. But yeah, they definitely have to look at moving a Petrie, a Carter, or a Granlund. Obviously, you're going to have to pay to get those moved. Petrie has more of the trade value, and so it'd be easier to move than a Carter or a Granlund, especially. But yeah, they definitely are not done. Or yeah, I guess I'll pass to you to see what you think of them.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to call. I think you've named the correct names there of who is most likely to be moved. The craziest thing for me is that Granlund deal. You trade him in. It was a really questionable trade when you did it, and now you're talking about moving him on. Like what did he play for you last year? Like freaking 15 games. Like it just, I, I don't get me wrong. That's probably a big reason why their GM is no longer there, and they've brought in a new GM in Kyle Dubas. We can talk about that a bit down the track, but I just don't understand it. Like that is just a massive stuff up on Pittsburgh's behalf. Like what was going through their GM's mind when they did that trade? Like it just, they paid a second round for him, a second round pick. I get it. They're not going for a rebuild. So that second round pick, it wasn't really needed. It's not. But Granlund at $5 million, that takes up a lot of the cap space, and that puts them in the trouble they're in right now. So yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if they had to give something up to get rid of Granlund. But the trouble I've got is if you move Petrie on and someone takes his full contract, then that's fine. That works out relatively well for you. For them to be any chance of getting Erik Karlsson, they basically need the Sharks to eat as much of the cap hit as possible. They need to bring in another team to take another chunk of the cap hit, and then they can take him. If they can get Karlsson down to about $5 million and they can move Petrie on in full, I actually don't mind that deal. I think that's a great deal, but that's a lot of work to get a deal like that done, because you've got to get the Sharks to probably eat, I think they've agreed to about $4 million. So that takes him down to 11.5, 7.5. Then you've got to get another team to eat $2.5 million. And it's not necessarily eating that contract. It's for 4 years. So it's a long time to eat a contract for. Plus, what will Pittsburgh have to give up for that? Because you're not just paying the Sharks for Erik Karlsson in the first place, the Sharks to retain some salary, then another club to retain some salary. So it's got to be a reasonable amount to give up to get him in the side. So yeah, I could see it being possible. I mean, a lot of people have come out and said, well, they did pick up Kyle Dubas, and he does love his 10 million plus players, but I don't know. I don't know if that deal can get done, and but it's one of those deals that I wouldn't mind. Petrie out, Carlson in around that $5 million mark. That would be fantastic. But then you've still got to move on, either a Jeff Carter or a Granlund. But at this point, I can't really see Granlund being moved. I can see Carter. Carter's got one year left on his deal at 3.1. So I could see Carter getting moved on, and you can replace Carter with I know Hinostroza is not a center, but like a player like him, I'm sure that they could sign a $900,000 contract to fill that fourth line center, and perhaps move Lars Eller onto the third. So I definitely feel like that you might see Petrie and Carter move, but it's the Granlund one for me that I just don't know if they're going to be able to do it, because who's going to take $5 million of Granlund? And I don't really think Pittsburgh can eat a contract at this point. Not if they're going to be serious about going for it for the next 2 years of Crosby's contract.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Is like, are they even good enough to do a cup run? So they didn't even make the playoffs this year. Say they make the playoffs, are they good enough to do a cup run though? Like, sure, you've got the Crosby factor, but from what we saw last year, they're missing a lot of pieces, and Crosby's on a decent contract. You've signed Malkin and Letang now, so you're in this boat. They've got a lot of movement here, but all they've really done is replace the whole entire penalty kill, their depth, and they bring in Riley Smith to replace Zucker. Their only real big addition is Graves on the defense, and that's to basically counteract that Letang's a liability sometimes in defense. So now you got someone who can look after him, because he had a plus 34 last year in plus minus, whereas Letang was a negative 13. So balance that out, you're looking at probably like a plus 10 of it, hopefully for your first line D. Yeah, my issue is I don't like they link with Erik Karlsson, but I don't think offense is the problem. It's the defense, in my opinion. I feel like they need Graves was the great pickup, but I would like to see more defensive defenders as well. I don't think Carlson is the problem. They got enough good puck movers and Crosby and Letang and all that stuff anyway. So, and yeah, well, I just needed to see something else. I was a bit iffy with the Tristan Jarry as well, because I'm not sure if he's that goaltender that will take you to the cup and win you the cup. I think he's decent, very serviceable and whatnot, but I guess you're stuck with him now, and that's your man going for this. But I just don't think that was my best pick to do it. Is the Jarry DeSmith tandem, at least for this year, with DeSmith being a UFA. So I'm a little bit iffy on the Jarry one as well, especially another $5 million contract. There seems to be just a lot of $5 million contracts on this team.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that teams that do this $4 to $6 million contracts, and just that's a lot of the team, they're very average teams, because there's not enough top end and there's not enough bottom end. And like you got Achari and Lars Eller here on the bottom end on the fourth line, and they're over 2 million. And that's just too much for fourth liners, in my opinion. They need to be 1.5 or less. So that's what I see as an issue for this team. Obviously, you have to move Granlund. They've got picks. They don't need picks. You're going for the cup for the next 3 years. Honestly, those picks should be on the market. I would use your seconds and thirds to try and get rid of Carter, Granlund, and Petrie, and get back whatever you can, and then use your firsts and whatever left, and bring in what you can to make this team basically. Or we are always going to finish top 3, and we're going at least into the conference final, if not winning the cup. That's the team that this team needs to be, and currently I don't see it. And I don't think the if they do get Letang is the piece that does it.
Carlson, yeah. That's the sort of issue I'm coming to with this. Like we said it with Washington. We know obviously the whole Obi situation, and Ovechkin going for his the all-time goal scorer. But they're mortgaging their rebuild for a good 3 years in attempt for that, and they're probably not even going to make playoffs. Like, I know they think that they can potentially do it, but it's not going to happen. I find Pittsburgh kind of in the same boat. I think Pittsburgh are much stronger than Washington, and they're a lot more of a chance to make that playoff spot. But when I look at the team, I'm like, yeah, but it probably is stronger than what it was last year. I think, like you said, the Graves edition's fantastic. Riley Smith from Vegas is really good. The question's going to be, can he? Like, I think he's paired. He's going to be paired with either Crosby or Malkin at one, like, for majority of it. So you would imagine his production would stay pretty strong. But and I don't mind the Lars Eller and how do you? Sorry, what's his?
What, Achari?
Achari, that's the one. I don't mind those additions because I think they're pretty solid on those, third, fourth lines, and I think they're also relatively good on the penalty kill, which is what they need. But yeah, as you said, is this strong enough to compete come playoffs? And I don't really think so, especially for the fact that they're going to lose probably a Jeff Carter, Petrie, as you said. Like, this team right now is not what you're going to see. They need to at least move one player. So they're going to lose at minimum a Jeff Carter, basically, because they need to get under the cap. So the team's going to get weaker from here with Carter going out, unless they can somehow replace Carter with a better player for cheaper, or replace a Granlund for cheaper. I don't know how they'll do that, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, even if they do make those changes, I could see them potentially slipping into a wild card spot. And that's purely based on its, Sidney Crosby, and that man can pretty much do anything. But again, yeah, do they go anywhere in the playoffs? Probably not. And my biggest thing is are they doing a Washington and mortgaging their next 3 years to try and keep that Crosby, Malkin, Letang era going on for another 2 to 3 years, because Crosby signed on for this year and next. Malkin and Letang are signed on for the next several years. Are they focusing too much on the old times and trying to keep them going for as long as possible? I get it, right? Like, they've won 3 cups and they've been a massive part of the franchise. They're fantastic. They're supposed to be fantastic blokes. So I get it. You want Crosby to be a one club player. Probably Malkin and Letang too. Like, that'd be an absolute fairy tale for them to all retire as Pens. But how much is that worth? Is it worth sacrificing 3 years of what could essentially be a rebuild? Because if they start the rebuild, they could be coming out of it in 3 to 4 years. But if they're not starting for another 3 to 4 years, all of a sudden, like, you're losing all the assets you've got. You don't really have many prospects coming through, and it could be that they go from making the playoffs 15 plus years straight to not making the playoffs for 10.
Yeah,
and that's
well,
a
I always go
real
for it.
reality.
I think you always go for it for the next 3 years. The way you go about it's for the very, very questionable part. I think the Letang deal was too long in regards to term. I feel like Malkin's should have been a 2-year, expiring the same time Crosby does. Like, I feel like they should have matched with Crosby and just be like, all right, everything lines up with Crosby. He could resign, but if he win a cup this year or next year or whatever, I'd say, like, if you're Crosby, like, we'd just go, oh well, I did it. I don't really need to do it anymore. I can retire. So, but you'd still be stuck with Letang at this point with this contract. So that's my issue. Is just the terms that they're signed with the contracts. You definitely go for it. I would be mortgaging my assets, but I would be mortgaging my assets for the right type of deals. So I'm looking at my 25-year-old players that I could, once this is over, they'd be 28, 29, something like that, that they're still serviceable and it's not a complete, utter shite show without the core three. So that's the type of contract I'd be looking for. I like the Graves edition term. You can debate how too long, but honestly, 4.5 mil will look really good in the future. I feel like he was more of a 3.5 mil player, though he did really good statistically and everything. But I just fell out of love with him at New Jersey just because he is so slow that if he gets beat, he is not catching whoever's beating him. And sure, he's a big body and good reach, but yeah, if you get around him, if he stumbles, it's basically in on. So that's my only big issue with Graves, is just how slow he is. It's like watching a snail on ice. And yeah, so look, the Jeff Carter, Granlund, Petrie thing. Petrie for me, like, I know he's like just been below average, but honestly, I'm happy to keep him over the other two. My big one's to move Granlund and Carter. The only thing is that Petrie has more trade value that you can move him easier without offering so much. But in my opinion, you have to move Granlund if you want to win a cup. You can't have 5 mil and producing what he produces. And I would personally not eat the 1 year this year. I would move Carter as well. So those are the two I move. That's 8 mil there. So you're looking around just under, let's say, 5.5 mil left. You got O'Connor the sign. You sign him, looking at around 4 mil left or whatever what O'Connor gets. Then I would be looking at Lars Eller and Achari moving up to the third, and then filling out my bottom four with players that I know can be dependable for a fourth line. I'm not looking for huge points. I'm not looking for a big thug that will beat everyone up. Just someone day in, day out that play a special team, power play or penalty kill, and will hopefully play 82 games. Not an injury-prone player.
Yeah, and relatively cheap as well. So
Yeah,
you're looking around
you're
that
looking at $1.5 and
$1
under.
mark. Yeah, for sure. I think that would be ideal, and I think if Kyle Dubas could have the trade deadline period back from last year, like he was the one involved, not not the last GM. I dare say he wouldn't be signing Granlund. He wouldn't be making that trade.
I don't think pretty much any other GM does. Personally.
No, well, and that's why he got fired. Like I I think that was writing on the wall. I think that he was always a possibility of getting fired anyway before that, but um, it was inevitable. It was basically a lock after that sort of trade, because how dumb? Like, what were you thinking? Like, yeah,
No,
I don't know.
it goes down in history as one of the worst trades. There's no reasoning behind it. It's just is what it is, and the future of the organization has to eat it. Look, number 5 in the league for shots last year. Basically top 5 in the league, but number 8's in shots against. So they play a very open, free-flowing game. You bring in Graves to hopefully shore that down with Letang, because he has big size, big reach, cut down the ice. In regards to their special teams, pretty average. Just does the job. Power play was 21%. Middle of the mark in the league. Penalty kill was 79%, middle market league. So overall 100%. Generally, if you get 100 plus, you're looking pretty good. That's what you want. That's what you're aiming for with those two stats combined. And they do that. Obviously, the penalty kill is the thing to watch this year, because they've just basically stripped it and completely replaced it. So that is my big question mark, is their penalty kill. And the fact that they're basically only 3 players were at plus minus positive in the forward line. The rest were all negative. So I would like to see at least the top 6 be positive, at least. And if you're going for a cup, it has to be like your top 9, right? So that's what I think. So I need to see that they are producing better defensively, because offensively this team's really sound. It's just the defensive side of things, and some of that does come down to Jari and D. Smith and how they are going to give the confidence in their defenders and forwards on how they're going to be playing as well. So yeah.
Yeah, look, I think they've got the players on paper to make a push for the playoffs and push for a wild card spot. But if this was 3 or 4 years ago, in terms of New Jersey were trash, Ottawa, you had the three Atlantic teams in Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit were trash. You had a couple other teams sort of on the real question mark. Carolina was only just coming up. You could probably say that this team will probably get you a top three at that point. But the East is so strong at the moment that it's like, yeah, cool. On paper, this team doesn't look too bad, and there is a lot of potential here. But is it better than Carolina, New Jersey, New York Rangers? Probably not. Is it better than Columbus, New York Islanders? That's probably around the mark where they are, which means that they're potentially up for grabs with a wild card spot. But then you're also competing with the Atlantic. Is this team stronger than Boston, Toronto, Tampa, Florida, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit? There's 7 teams. You don't have to worry if you make top 3. You don't have to worry about the Atlantic, but I can't see them making top 3. So they're going to be fighting for that wild card spot with potentially 2 other Metro teams and 4 bloody Atlantic teams. So it's just really tough to see these guys having a bounce back season and being back in the playoffs. I mean, the Crosby factor is always going to be there. The man's a champion. It's been an absolute pleasure to watch him play over the past 5, almost 20 years. Like, he's been absolutely beautiful to watch. But he is aging, and yeah, the East is just getting stronger and stronger. Like, I can't see them bouncing back this year. I'm sorry to say it, but I just don't think this is a team that's going to make the playoffs. And I was quite hopeful for them last season. I think we both had just this. It looked like it was going to be a fairy tale, and we both had them a really good chance of winning the Stanley Cup, especially with the way they started. But it just all sort of fell away from them. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really see them bouncing back this season. And I think that might just be the end of the Sidney Crosby era, because Gensel's a UFA at the end of this year. Is he got to stay and sign on? Are they going to have the cap space for him to stay and sign on? Where do you go from here after this season? And if they don't make it this season, what's the likelihoods that they make it the season after? I feel like this could truly be the end of the Sidney Crosby era.
Yeah, I got a different opinion though. I think they do make it this year. Not being top 3, I think they make the wild card, beating out like an Islanders or whatnot. That's where I have them. I feel like the Graves addition is basically replacing Marino, the Marino trade. So I feel like it shores up the defense, and obviously they're making playoffs with him. So I feel like that's the situation, is that they're getting back into the playoffs, but is it anything noteworthy? Sure, once you get in there, you can be another team and whatnot, but really, is this team that team? And ultimately, I don't know. Like, you got, talking about Malkin, he played his first season of 82 games last year. I doubt that you get 82 games out of Malkin this year. So you're probably going to have, 60 or something like games from Malkin. So there's 20 games you got to replace him with a better center, and you got what Carter and Eller down the middle. So I don't see that middle six center to replace him, because I feel like inevitably he does get injured. So I feel like that will be
Mm.
the flaw for them this year is injuries with like a Letang and Malkin and any other players, because they are somewhat on the older side of things. And yeah, but I do think they get the wild card. I don't think they do much better than a wild card just because of how strong Canes, Devils, and Rangers are. But that's where I have them. Basically, currently around 4, maybe 5th in the Metro, but I feel like they get better. They're obviously not done, so we have to see what additions they make, because they should be getting better with the trades that are to come. And if the Carlson thing doesn't go through, how do they get rid of a Petrie, Groundland, and a Carter? It's probably having to pay people to take it, but then what are they giving up to bring in better assets as well? So they're definitely not done. I think they get better from this roster onwards, and I do think that makes them a playoff team.
If they get better from this, so if they replace Carter, Granlund, and Petrie, then yeah, I could. That my opinion might change on that. But as it stands right now, I understand that they're going to lose at least Jeff Carter. It might be Granlund, but for me, it's Carter with the 1 year left. He's easier to move. And maybe O'Connor, you sign him to a minimum deal, and you're right at the cap limit. That could be all they're able to do. So right now, I'm basing mine off of they might not be done, but can they get any of that rest of that stuff done? If they can, my opinion may change on them. I might turn around and go, well, yeah, they got rid of Granlund, they got rid of Petrie, they actually strengthened their side, so I can see them slipping into that wild card spot now. But right now, with what I see on the table, I just feel like the other teams around them are just too strong. Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. Like I said, that Crosby factor is always going to be there. That man he's a legend. He's going to be a Hall of Famer for a reason. So who knows what's to come of it? But for me right now, I don't think they'll make the playoffs unless they do some drastic changes before the season and strengthen this lineup. So for me, Pittsburgh miss out on the playoffs again. For you reckon they're going to bounce back. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Who out of us is going to make the right call there?
Well, I'm betting on with Dubas, so that's it's an interesting call. So we have a few more $10 million players in here. It would be interesting if they did get like a Nylander from Toronto. Uh, play with his brother and whatnot, even though his brother's not really playing. But it would be a little funny little thing. But yeah, another 10 million player plus they could probably sign. Yeah. So far I've liked what Dubas has done for this team. Graves, the replacement of the PK, bringing in Smith just for a pick. I think he's done really well for honestly the shit show that he was given. I think it's absolutely
Hextall left him with, like 100%.
So
he's done a good job so far.
But yeah, it's really just getting that Petrie, Carter, Groundland. Once that's sorted, and he has some flexibility and a little bit of liquidity that he can move around, and depending how many draft picks he has to offer and lose for moving those assets, I feel like he can do a lot. And I would just like possibly him not to get the Carlson so he can get something else. But, if you're replacing Petrie for Carlson, depending what else gets done, it's not too bad of a deal. So ultimately, playoffs. Thing is, if they make the playoffs, because Malkin and Letang are so injury prone and older, I don't think their bodies can handle like consecutive years of deep playoffs, because of how many
Mm,
injuries we saw this year, especially with Florida, and how bad those injuries are on the body. So you could somewhat see not career-ending injuries, but player deteriorating type injuries coming up.
mm.
Especially for like a Malkin because he is so injury prone. So that is my biggest concern with these guys. And if that does happen, then yeah, I feel like the next 2+ years is written off.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this is the year. I think if they don't make it, you could probably put a line through them for the rest of Sidney Crosby's career. Um, it's pretty sad to say. I'm not a Pittsburgh fan by any stretch. Like it's not who I support, but Sydney. I've loved watching Sidney Crosby play. So it's going to be a sad sort of period just watching. It's still going to be great to get to watch him on ice and play and finish his career, but it's going to be sad to sort of realize that he potentially won't be playing in the playoffs again unless he signs for another team. Um, but yeah, like just that Crosby Penguins era of just pure domination could be coming to a close, and yeah, it's going to be a sad time. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they can do it this year. Who knows what can happen? But yeah, me personally, I think that's it. I'm pretty much putting a line through the Penguins. Sorry, Pens fans.
Big cool. I think it's wrong. Boom. I'm with you, Penguin fans. Love me. Alrighty. I guess that's it there. So yeah, feel free to like the video. Leave a comment below on what you think of the Penguins, if they do make it or not. Is Jari the man to hold the helms for him? And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, leave all notifications on, and I guess till next video, guys. We'll see you next time. Until next time.
Catch you guys.